John 17, verses 20 and 21. My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father. Just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. If you're of a certain age, you have a story just like I have a story. 23 years ago today, I was in graduate school sitting next to my best friend. We took every single class together. We each had a role. It was my job to make sure that we graduated. It was his job to make sure that we actually had friends. And so during this class, he left at some point, came back. There was always a sheet of paper right in between us. That way we could write notes. And he wrote down on the sheet of paper, planes have crashed into New York, Washington, and also Chicago. It's kind of strange to look back now and think, where did the Chicago thing come from? But those of us who were around, we recognized the chaos of that day. We didn't know what was going to happen next. And immediately, a tension raised within me. I rushed out of class because just the night before, I was talking to my wife, who had only been my wife for a year. She was out on the West Coast doing a trade show, and she was changing her flight. She was going to fly back early, that way we could be together. And one of the last things she said to me was, hey, I'll probably fly through Chicago and then down to Alabama, where we actually were. And so I didn't know what was going on, if this was going on in Chicago. And so it took several hours to figure out, was she safe or not? And sure enough, her plane had landed in Oklahoma. She ended up driving in. And of course, the whole threat out of Chicago was a false threat nonetheless. You know what's interesting to me? Now with teenage kids, trying to explain to them what that day was like, there's so much of it they can relate to, even though they weren't alive. They can relate to the chaos, to the tension, to the uncertainty. They're in no way surprised that a terrorist attack happened, that evil happened. They are almost primed to understand that bad things are going to happen in this world. There's really only two things that they can't understand about that day. One, they can't understand the lack of technology that we had. And then two, they can't comprehend the amount of unity that we experienced in the days following. How there was just this oneness that took place in the aftermath of that attack that is foreign to my children, and I think it's now foreign to our culture. It's interesting in John chapter 17 here, as Jesus is praying for his disciples, he then prays for those who will believe the disciples' message. That's the rest of us. And he prays that you and I would be one in the same way that he and the Father are one. And he says that the byproduct of that unity should cause other people to come to know Jesus, that it should so stand out from the rest of culture, that our unity should so cause us to stand out that it would cause other people to go, there's something about Jesus. And yet notice the unity of September 11th. It wasn't like automatically in that moment we became of absolute one mind in every opinion. By no means. That unity was the byproduct not of us having the exact same values about everything, but by us prioritizing the values that truly mattered. And suddenly all these issues that we divide ourselves with on a daily basis took a backseat in comparison to those things that were most important. You know, one thing that breaks my heart as a pastor is for those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, we so quickly buy into the division of this culture that we tend to prioritize these secondary issues and face division because of that, at the very expense of what Jesus has called us to do. What defines you today? For me, the defining factor of whether or not you can and I can have unity is not your nation of origin. It's not your political preference. It's not even your theological understandings of certain ideals. It's simply this. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe that he is the hope of the world? Do you believe that God created all people? Now they're created in his image, and yet they're fallen in desperate need of salvation, and Jesus now gives us that salvation. If that's true, then you and I can have a unity that cannot be broken as long as we prioritize that most important fact above all other secondary issues. Think about it in your faith, in your family, in business. What truly matters today? And make sure you define your unity based on the primary issues and not everything else that comes later.